Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it is with pleasure that I rise to speak on the Members of Parliament Staff Amendment Bill 2023 and the Parliamentary Workplace Support Service Bill 2023. These bills came about as a result of the shocking findings of the Human Rights Commission independent review of the workplace culture here in Parliament House and across the country in Commonwealth Place workplaces, and the resulting Jenkins Set the Standard report that came from that. We should remember the facts that came out of that report. The Set the Standard report heard that 51% of all people currently working in Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces have experienced at least one incident of bullying, sexual harassment or actual or attempted sexual assault. The Set the Standard report found there was an absence of an adequate authoritative people and culture function for parliamentarians and their staff and a lack of standardised people management processes. The report was asked to make recommendations to ensure that the Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces are safe and respectful for all those who work in this place and the parliamentary electoral officers around the country. I commend the work of Kate Jenkins and her Set the Standard report, which has laid the foundation for this legislation. The bills are the product of extensive consultation with parliamentarians and staff across Parliament, including through the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force, its staff consultation group and union representatives. I've had the pleasure of being on the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force, and whilst there has at times been robust discussion, it is pleasing that we have gotten to the point of now having legislation before the Parliament to progress some of the recommendation of the Set the Standard. But it's clear that there is still so far to go. I'd like to thank all the members of the task force for their contribution, especially those staff and past staff who shared really confronting experiences and stories, who trusted in a system that had let them down during their own employment to hope to better the system for the others that would come after them. So these bills seek to implement a start to better processes and standards. The Federal Parliament is one of Australia's most prominent workplaces. The people that work here should have the systems they need to go about their work in a professional, safe and respectful environment. The Member of Parliament Staff Amendment Bill will modernise the Act, improve transparency and clarify the employment framework for parliamentarians and their staff. This bill will support cultural change in our parliamentary workplaces. The bill will underline the responsibilities and obligations of Members of Parliament as the employer, and it includes requirements intended to guide decision-making by parliamentarians about employment matters and to support fair outcomes and processes when making significant employment decisions. Appropriately, the bill provides for the further review within 5 years of the amendments commencing, which means that we have the opportunity to better this, because I don't think any legislation will be perfect in improving the standards. The Parliamentary Workplace Support Service Bill 2023 implements Recommendation 11 of Set the Standard report. It's an important step as the first major legislation to deal with the recommendations made in that report. And importantly, it establishes the Parliamentary Workplace Support Service, PWSS, as an independent statutory agency to provide human resource services for parliamentary staff to prevent workplace issues and resolve problems earlier. Its key functions will be around human resources, support for staff, policy development, education and training, review, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. The PWSS must prepare annual reports on gender and diversity of employees, gender equality in remuneration, employment of MOP staff, progress in prevention of and response to unacceptable conduct, culture and performance, work, health and safety matters. So it is a very broad remit that the PWSS will seek to improve. Parliamentarians would also be required to consult with the new PWSS prior to making a decision in relation to the employment of staff, whether that is and especially if it's in relation to termination or suspension of staff members with or without pay. The new provision for temporary suspension of employment will offer an alternative to termination and will be another mechanism to address risks in this workplace, as far too often those that have spoken up have seen themselves shuffled on, moved aside, or their employment terminated. But there is still much that can be done better. We know that it's been slow getting to this point, with many changes are still to come and more legislation in relation especially to codes of conduct implementation and the IPSC that is due to come, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Commission. It's now been 2 years since the Set the Standard report was handed down. And so we need to work quickly. The Parliamentary Leadership Task Force, I know, is focused on the task in relation to establishing the Independent Parliamentary Standards Commission, which is a body which will ultimately implement the codes of conduct. And I think there needs to be a greater level of training in employment law for ministers and members of Parliament, because we need to remember, for all those in this place, there isn't automatically being experience when it comes to managing or employing people. And so, as we take on those responsibilities of representing our electorates, but also employing staff, it is important that more training and awareness of the requirements is had by members of Parliament. So whilst there's a lot more to be done and more legislation to be implemented, I support these bills as an essential first step in making Parliament a safer workplace. Finally, it's impossible to talk about this legislation and the progress it represents without talking about even the events of this week. No legislation can ultimately change what is wrong with the culture of this place. It needs to come from members themselves, and it needs to come from leadership, especially when it comes to the major parties. This week's events in this place during question time have shown we still have a long way to go. We have seen senior members of major parties, in particular the opposition, behave in a way that is unbecoming of this Parliament, unbecoming during question time. We should not have pointing, heckling, yelling, encouragement of people in the gallery to participate in the proceedings of this place, to disregard the warnings that have been made by the Speaker in relation to the conduct that is appropriate and appropriate for this place. Over the last 2 days, I think it's shown just how far that culture still has to change, that this should be a place of debate, of respectful exchange of ideas. It can be robust, but it should never be disrespectful, and it should never be to a point that, and to a standard that is not befitting a place like here. We have children in the gallery. They are here now, but they are here during question time. And they come away incredibly disillusioned and horrified that this is the standard. If this is the place, the heart of our nation, where we come up with the laws that will direct the lives of so many millions of people, and this is behaviour and conduct accepted, then what example are we setting the next generation, these children that come and watch? Last night I had the pleasure of attending an event for International Women's Forum, and they had sadly, these are leaders in business, in arts, in non-for-profit and profit organisations with vast experiences in a world outside of this place. And they sat through the question time of yesterday and were horrified. They were horrified at the incredible waste of time and taxpayer money that this represented, because there were no serious answers provided and there was conduct that was entirely inappropriate, that would never be accepted in any other workplace. And so I ask every member of this place to pause, to think about their conduct, to take responsibility, each and every one of us, for our conduct in this place and what example that sets, to never let the fiery or the conviction of the rightness of your argument overcome what is correct and appropriate behaviour. We need to make sure that the culture in this place changes, and that is a responsibility on each and every one of us. So whilst these legislations start to improve, we have to do more. because you cannot assume that you conduct yourself in this place in an aggressive, bullying, harassing way and walk out of this chamber and then become a respectful boss for your employees, that you are somehow going to then adopt a whole different standard of conduct. This is where it is a slippery slope, and this is where the problems start. So it's incredibly important that every member in this place and the other place pause and reflect on their conduct and ensure they apply at all times the highest standards. Thank you.